All right, sorry about that. I had to take a phone call from my son, but I am back. So, as I was talking about, trying to get my laser to go straight across that line by keeping the machine moving in a straight line to make sure that my quilt is loaded straight. So right there, I'm starting to get off a little bit. And I'm gonna just shift it up and stick another pin right there. You're only pinning until you get your quilt basted. Then you gotta go back and pull all these pins out. But this will help you, and I can already kind of tell it looks like it's sloped a little. This will help you get your quilt loaded straight. See, I'm kind of wonky right there. And I'm not as good at this as Valerie is. If you go to her Facebook page, VG Quilting, and watch her, she does a fabulous job, but I do good enough to get my quilts quilted straight. And you know, if any of you are familiar with Jenny Doan with Missouri Star Quilting, she said finished is better than perfect. So I'm not perfect, but you do want your quilt on your machine fairly straight, because again, it makes a huge difference when you finish that quilt, being able to square it up and being able to not end up with a whole bunch of extra material. All right, I'm off right there, so I'm just going to kind of shift, just smooth my thing up. And it's easy to stick the pins in the quilt if you're sticking it where the bed of the machine is. If you're trying to stick it out here, man, it's nearly impossible to get a pin in the quilt because the quilt is dipping. So use the machine to help you stick these pins in. Yeah, I'm way off right there, like way off. So I really need to adjust that up there. Stick a pin. And keep going across. Oops, oh, and see, I moved my machine. Let's go back to where we were straight, because I accidentally pulled my machine forward. You want to keep your machine straight, not pulling it forward, so that it's going in a straight line. We're off right there. So again, I just gotta kind of shift that quilt up and stick a pin to hold it. Just off there. And we're almost to the end. I'm way off there. Let's shift that way up. Way, way, way off right there. Grab my pins. Yeah, and again, so I'm a little wonky on this seam in this spot right here. Not too bad right there. It's fairly straight there. So I'm going to stick a pin right here close to the edge. So I want to baste my quilt around the edges. So it's very important that you baste your quilt fairly close to your edge. I'm going to stick my bungees on here. Kind of put some tension on my quilt. You want to baste fairly close to the edge of your quilt, because as your machine is moving and quilting your design, you don't want your foot to get caught under the edge of your material, because when that happens, it can get all tangled up around your foot. It can cause a big, huge mess. You might end up even having to cut your quilt to get it out from around your foot. It could damage your, it could just do a whole lot of damage. So you definitely want to be sure you baste fairly close to the edge, so that if the foot does catch it and flip it, you're not in danger of it getting flipped and start sewing and then catching and dragging your quilt. I've had that happen, and it is a miserable process. So I'm just going to put a few pins. Now, again, if you watch Valerie's video, she puts a lot of pins. For me, I just haven't found it necessary to have that many. That's my personal preference. For her, it works. So everybody has to find what works best for them. My goal here is to just hold things in place until I get some basting stitches in. I don't want to come far enough out that I don't hit that with my needle when I'm basting. But I have found if I don't use this method, I have a harder time keeping my quilt straight. So using this method of basting has greatly improved how my quilts come out. So I do recommend, oh, I need more pins. Let me get some more pins. I do recommend taking the time to straighten, make sure your quilt is straight on your frame to start, and then it's easier to keep it straight as you're going. Now I think she also checks the vertical line, so I may run my laser down one of these vertical lines just to make sure it's setting fairly straight. Again, I'm just going to put a few pins strategically just to hold my fabric still for basting purposes, because it makes it so much easier. I just don't put as many strategically as she does, but she does a fabulous job, so I'm definitely not saying to do it my way and don't do it hers, because her way is probably better than mine. But this just works for me. Okay, we're almost there. I know this is kind of a long section of this video, so just bear with me. I just don't want to be too close to the edge, because I struggle sometimes with keeping my machine in a straight line when I'm basting, because it's just hard to pull it. It's probably a setting that I'm just not aware of on making it easier to maneuver. Because honestly, I'm still fairly new at this, guys. I am by no means an expert. I'm still learning as well. I'm just sharing what I know to help those of you that are struggling and getting discouraged and talking about thinking you made a mistake in your investment and wanting to get rid of your machine or whatever, because I love my Bernina. It is a fabulous machine. My first investment in a long arm was with a different brand, which I won't name. A less expensive machine, because I was trying to get something I could afford, and I bought this machine and I struggled with setting the tension on it. I struggled with everything about it. I absolutely hated that machine. I cried over the investment that I made in it, because while it was less expensive than my Bernina, it was still quite an investment. And at one point I had so many problems with the first machine, I actually had the company replace it with a new one, but I still had the same problems, which told me it was not the particular machine I had, it was just the brand itself, which was not a good brand, at least not for me. So I sold that machine at a huge loss, and I decided at that point that if I was going to invest in a long arm, even if it was a huge investment, I was going to get the best. And I have not one day regretted the investment in my Bernina. It has been well worth the money. I'm not a spokesperson for Bernina. I'm not being paid for that opinion. I'm just telling you my opinion. I have loved every minute about owning this machine. I've not struggled one time with tension settings or anything like that. So, all right. So now I'm ready to baste down the edges of my quilt, which I may also do a little bit differently than other people or Valerie. I do one edge first, and then I go over and do the other edge, and then I come across the top. It might be better to start like maybe midway in your top and come over and down, and then maybe midway in your top and come over and down. That way, if you have any fullness in the quilt, you can spread it. But pinning this way, for me, has helped me not have any fullness that I've had to worry about trying to spread to the edges of the quilt. So that's just another technique you can try. You have to figure out what works for you. This is just kind of the way that I do it. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to come to my BSR3, And I'm going to set it to 4 stitches per inch. You can do 2, you can do 1. If you want long stitches, because you intend on removing those stitches, you can do them longer. I'm doing short stitches. I may or may not remove them. If I can keep it fairly straight and fairly on the edge, they're either going to get cut off when I trim my quilt, or they're going to be hidden with the binding. If I get way off, which sometimes I do, my machine goes out of bounds, those I might pull out. But for the most part, this is what I'm doing. So I'm going to come up here to the edge, hopefully you can see, and I'm going to pull up my bobbin thread. So I have my toggles here programmed to do certain things. My front toggle is going to lower my needle, and then I can press it again to raise my needle and pull up my bobbin thread. So I can move it out of the way and grab my bobbin thread, and I'm going to hang on to my top thread and my bobbin thread, and then the back button actually will start the quilting. So I'm going to hit my back button on my toggle back here, and it will quilt as I move. That's the BSR3 setting, and I'm going to try to stay close to my edge, which means my quilt is not perfectly straight on the edge here. So I'm going to adjust a little bit and come all the way close to where my frame is. And then I'm going to hit the back toggle button and turn off the quilting, which lowers my needle. I'm going to hit the front button to raise my needle. I'm going to back up, grab that top thread, bring it forward while I'm holding it, and drop my needle up and down again so that I can pull up my bobbin thread and clip the bobbin. So if you don't clip the bobbin thread, it stays attached underneath that quilt. So when I get ready to move my machine all the way to the left, it's going to be dragging that bobbin thread. That's why you need to pull it up and clip it off, so you're not dragging it across the whole underside of your quilt. So we're going to come over here, and this time I'm going to start down here, oops, at the bottom, close to the edge, hold my top thread, pull up my bobbin thread, back up so you can see it grabs the bobbin. You can pull this out. Now if your needle misses the bobbin thread, just go up and down as many times as you need to grab it. If it keeps missing it, you'll just need to move your machine out from under your quilt and open your bobbin case and pull your bobbin out and stick it back in there. It may be that somehow the bobbin thread's gotten short inside the case. Maybe it's snapped back or something and the needle just can't grab it. So just pull it out, stick it back in, make sure everything in the bobbin is correct if that's the case, and it should work just fine. But I have had that happen where I've gone up and down and up and down and up and down and for some reason not grabbing the bobbin. So if that's the case, just check your bobbin. Alright, so now we're still set on our BSR3 setting up here on our machine at 4 stitches per inch, and I'm going to hit my back button to start quilting and then start moving my machine. Make sure I don't hit those pins that I have stuck there. Ooh, that one's close, so I'm going to pull that pin out. I'm close to where I'm basting. Now I'm going to go across the top, and I'm going to try to see, go and pulling it across the top, for some reason it's stiffer, it's harder for me to pull my machine, especially with one hand. And I'm going to come down a little bit because I'm missing my fabric. I guess I need to show you. So I'm coming across the top, pull out a couple of pins here because I don't want to be in danger of hitting them. And I'm trying to hold that fabric as I quilt, but it's hard for me to pull my machine with the one hand. Go back up just a hair. But that's the good thing about these pins. With having everything kind of pinned down, I don't really have to hold the fabric in place because the pins are doing that job for me. So I can use both of my hands to baste the top here. If I didn't have those pins in place, the fabric would kind of be shifting and getting a little wonky. That's what the pins are doing, is helping me prevent that. All right, I'm at the end. Turn off the machine, raise the needle, come forward, grab the thread, go back, lower and raise the needle, pull up the bobbin, and clip that bobbin thread. All right, so now we are ready to start quilting. First thing I need to do is pull out all these pins. Then we'll go start setting our design up. So let me grab my little pin case and start pulling out these pins, because we can't quilt with the pins in the quilt. That will break a needle, damage the machine, cause all kinds of issues. So as you can see, for me, I don't need a ton of pins, like every inch or half inch. I just need enough to hold my fabric in place while I am basting so that it does not move. And then now that I've done this, once I get the first row quilted and I advance the quilt and I have to baste down the next section of just the two sides, I don't pin that. It really, things stay fairly even. So make sure you got all your pins out. I'm going to go back and double check and just run my hand, make sure I don't feel anything that I missed. The next thing I have is this little toggle system that I bought from allthingsquilty.com. Again, I'm not having a paid endorsement. I'm not paid to say anything or endorse anything. This is just what I have found that I love, and it works. So I set my little toggle system up. I'm just using it to hang right there, and I do the same thing on this end over here. And then I can set my toggles where my lines are in my quilt, and hopefully as I sewed this together I had fairly straight sewing lines. So I'm just going to set my toggle to show you what I'm doing. I'm going to set this first toggle here to the very edge of this border, and then I'm going to set this toggle to the left of the border. I'm going to come to my first seam. I'm going to set that toggle to the left of that seam. My next seam, I'm going to set that toggle to the left of the seam. This one I'm going to set to the left of the seam, and then I'm going to set one to the right. So now what happens as I advance my quilt to do the rows, if I come back and make sure my toggles are still lined up with my seams, then my quilt should be fairly straight. Now I can leave this toggle system here. I'm not going to be quilting this far down. Generally though, I'll move it just to make sure it's out of the way. And I'm just going to take it off, and I will bring it back when I'm ready to start the next row. And I also need my clamps. So we're going to clamp, since I'm not using the leader cloth for the quilt top, I'm going to clamp this, which helps put tension on my top and keep things in place. I really could use 3 clamps, I just only have 2, so I just kind of put them towards the end of the quilt. So now the next thing we need to do is start choosing our design. What do we want to put on our quilt? And I already know, and I already have it selected, but I'm going to go through the whole process of selecting your design just so you see. So you'll come up here to your screen, and you can see I've got icons on my screen. But with the last update, if you click this little blue eye, it actually shows you the words. And for me, it's easier to work with the words than with the icons, because I don't always remember what all these little symbols mean, but the words just spell it out for me. So I prefer seeing the words. You can do it however you like. The first thing you want to do is go to your design pool. And if you have a design already selected, you can double click it and it will remove it. I'm going to leave it because that's the one I'm going to use. But you can go to your design pool and you can pick out from your list of designs in your machine whatever you want to quilt. So we're going to pretend like I double tapped one and brought it into my design center. I'm going to close the screen. Excuse me. And there's my design. That's what I want to put on my quilt. So I'm going to first, I need to tell the machine some information about my quilt. I need to tell it the size of my quilt, where to start sewing by realigning my safe area, and all that stuff. So let's go to quilt size first. And if we remember, my quilt width is 68 inches. So I'm going to do this again. Cancel that. So you go to quilt size, and I'm going to just click where the width is, and I'm going to change that to 68 because it was preset at 60, and tell it OK. And my height was 87 inches, so I'm going to tell it it's 87 inches high. So now the machine knows how large my quilt is, and I'm going to zoom out so you can see. So it has set my quilt based on where I previously set my my safe area. It has based the size of my quilt on that setting. Now I need to tell the machine where exactly my quilt is sitting. So the first thing I want to do is come over here to the machine, and we're going to move it to where we want to start sewing. And I'm going to take my foot off so I can see my laser, and I'm going to put right in the top corner of my quilt. I have a feeling it may warn me that it can't quilt here, but we're going to try. So I'm going to put my foot right there, or my laser, and I'm going to come back over. Well, let's take a look at that. I think I'm off. Yep. Let me go back to the corner. Okay, so I'm right in the very top corner of my quilt. Put my foot back on. Oh, you know what, too, guys, that I forgot? I know for this particular design, I am going to need about 3 bobbins. So I need to run some bobbins before I actually even start. Let's do that really quick. And I'm going to let the machine bobbin run out so that I can show you how to reset your machine if you have a thread break or a bobbin run out in the middle of your design and you have to reset everything and you're not sure how to do that. So we'll do it on purpose so that I can show you. So let's wind this up. I'm just going to wind me a couple of bobbins. Let's just check and see how full the bobbin is that I have in here, because I may put one that's... And I need to clean my bobbin case anyway. I didn't do what I told y'all to do about cleaning and oiling your bobbin case area. So I'm going to stick a couple of drops of oil in there. I have not dusted it like I should. Put a little drop of oil before we start, and that's a fairly decent full bobbin, so I'm going to put this one on. That way the bobbin's going to run out and I can show you how to reset your machine when that happens. So let's just use this bobbin to start so it'll run out faster. Alright, so now we're ready to start. So let's go back to what I was doing. One more bobbin to run. While this bobbin runs, we'll start setting our machine. I'm just going to hold my bobbins in my little tray here until I need them. So let's go back and put our laser back at the top corner of the quilt, which isn't showing me while the bobbin's running. Let it finish running that bobbin. Come on. Alright, make sure my laser's turned on, which it is. Okay, so I've got my laser back up in the top left of my quilt, or close enough. And put the foot back on. Now let's come over here, and we're going to realign the safe area. We're going to tell the machine where our needle is sitting. So it thinks, if you see the crosshairs, I'll zoom in. It thinks that my needle is way up here outside the quilt, but it's not. So I'm going to realign the safe area. I'm going to go snap to point. Actually, that is where my quilt is sitting. So I want to put a dot. Someone suggested using my mouse, which is smart, but I don't really have a place to put my mouse to use it, so we'll try. Click right where those crosshairs are. So if I put my dot right on my crosshairs and I hit OK,